Yes, started.
एक मिनिट हा. अजून पूर्ण
Mhm.
स्ट्रीमिंग झालं नाहीये.
Mhm.
या. गुड इव्हनिंग एव्हरीवन. We can start today's lecture. I will request our sir for further instructions. Thank you.
Yes, yes. Thank you so much, madam. Yeah, good evening, everyone. Respected dignitaries present online, our distinguished guest, Dr. Asim Auti, representatives of Maharashtra Vriksha Samvardhini Pune, Department of Botany, RJ College, Mumbai, Balasaheb Khardekar College, Vengurla, and Institute of Natural History Education and Research, Pune, colleagues, students, researchers, and nature enthusiasts, and all our dear participants joining us today. A very warm welcome to everyone. Today, we have gathered here online for a very fascinating exploration of an idea that changed the way humanity understands life and perhaps much more than life. Today, we have with us Dr. Asim Auti from ISER Pune. Uh, Before we begin, there are very few simple requests I want to make to the audience. Please keep your microphone muted. Feel free to post your questions and comments in the chat box. After the session, we'll have the question answer session, interactive session, and sir would definitely would love to interact with you. And please do not interrupt the speaker during the presentation and maintain the academic decorum of this session. Now I request my colleague Dr. Aishwarya Parab to introduce to you today's guest. Over to you, Aishwarya.
Thank you, sir. Good evening, everyone. Myself, Aishwarya Parab from Department of Botany, RJ College, Mumbai. It is my privilege to introduce today's speaker, Dr. Asim Auti. Dr. Asim Auti currently working as a Principal Technical Officer, National Program on Teacher Educator Development, NPTED, Indian Institute of Science Education and Research, ISER, Pune. Dr. Asim is a biologist by training and a passionate teacher working at the intersection of science, education, and research. He learned his doctorate and from Savitribai Phule Pune University, and after 2 years of research in Germany on a research scholarship, taught undergraduate students for about 15 years. He is especially drawn to evolutionary biology and its central place in biology education. Along with fellow researchers and experts, he has designed and conducted a short course, Understanding Evolution in Biology and Beyond, and has been invited to speak on evolution of birds and insects in several certificate courses, including those run by academic organizations. His research reflects the breadth of his training, conservation strategies for threatened plant species of Western Ghats, and molecular approaches to microbial diversity in hydrocarbon contaminated soils. He has published both peer reviewed research and popular science writing. Dr. Asim has contributed to curriculum design for state university affiliated colleges and serves as a board of studies member for autonomous colleges, working with students and educators from schools through universities. He develops and implements pedagogical tools built around active learning and inquiry based classrooms. He received the Anil Sadgopal Award for popularization of science from CUBE and Kishore Bharti in 2023 and is a National Academics Education Fellow in Life Sciences, National Academics USA. He is also a member of ISER Pune, Outreach Team, and Principal Technical Officer for NPTED program. With this, I welcome you, sir, for today's session.
Thank you so much. Hello, everyone. I hope I'm audible to all of you. I'm now going to share my screen and directly basically go into the talk, the presentation. I'll be mostly talking in English, but at times I also will use Marathi. But as sir mentioned, please do uh, put your comments, questions in chat so that we can answer them. Is the screen visible, sir?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Perfect.
Okay, great. So let me uh, start with what we are going to do. So we have an hour or so, and this is a topic which, of course, it's very difficult to fit into an hour, especially to an audience who is mixed, meaning perhaps are not that interested or not explored the whole theory and the world of evolutionary biology, Darwin's theory of evolution, and so on. So, for that, I am going to keep this the whole conversation a bit light. The work that I'm going to quote is from scientists and researchers across the world who have worked on these things. I have tried to basically design the whole talk so that it appeals to a diverse audience. But at any point, if you feel like something is missed, something that you want more explanation or discussion, please put it in chat and we'll try to address that. So I'm going to use slides because, like I mentioned, the whole topic is really huge, and this is going to help us as well as you to um, understand different aspects that I am going to talk about today. So just quick question to all of you. So what you see here, right? It's a photo of a banyan tree, right, Bargat. There are four different images that you see about it. A quick question to you is which of these has an ancestor? What do you think? The tree itself, the tree which is going on temple, so you can see the temples. You see different words from different origins actually um, talking about the same plant, and you also see a picture of mobile phones, different types of mobile phones, one older one new one. So quick
Mm.
question, which of these has ancestors according to you? You can unmute or type in chat. This will help me. Anyone? A simple question. याच्यापैकी कुठल्या गोष्टींना ancestors असतात? First one. All of them, first one. Okay. Okay. Thank you, those who are responding. So I think majority of us are saying the tree itself has ancestry. That is very interesting, and thank you for your responses. It's going to help me basically talk about other things more. As we go ahead, if you think we have time, can we quickly do this? So it's a Mentimeter, meaning
Mhm.
you will have to, read these statements and mark them as what you think about these, whether you agree, whether you disagree. This is going to help me understand the audience. This is going to help me understand what things you already know, what things I should talk about more. So you can scan the code, or I have also put in the link in the chat. If you can see the chat, you can click on the link and it will take you to the page. I can see 3 of you joined on Menti.
Yes.
We'll do it quickly. I want to finish this by 7, but yes. So those of you who will watch this on YouTube, maybe on a later time, um, you may not be able to participate in this, but do think about the statements and your own answers as you see fit. Okay, let me hide the results first. One more minute, maybe. One response is in, but others, please respond. You'll have to give your opinion whether the statement is correct understanding or misconception. And it's a scale. You can decide the scale. Awar sir, is this okay? You're able to see?
Yes.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Okay. Half a minute. 3 of you have responded. Okay. Thank you. So please continue submitting your answer, but I'll go ahead. This is very interesting. So the first statement, I got your results, what you're looking at. These are the average scores of all that you have submitted. You can see that all of them are not same. Different scores means on an average, people have voted half for the statement. People have more voted towards misconception for first three. And this one, the evolution has a definite goal. And some of you have voted all species are constantly evolving as correct understanding. That's an average. Okay, and it changes as you vote in. So evolution process that occurs because organisms want or need to adapt. It's 0.7 right now out of 1. Okay, wonderful. I'm going to talk about these statements at different cases as we see and go ahead. But interesting part to note is none of you unanimously select any of these statements, and which is very interesting. There are few things that are not true in the statements, but we are going to see them one by one as we go ahead. Okay, to the next slide. What you see here is the journey that Darwin took, started from England and then went towards South America, went to variety of places and islands around the coast, including the Galapagos Island, for which he is famous for. And again came back, did not go to this area particularly. So of course did not come to India, but went back to Cape Town and again back to Plymouth, right? He was only 22 when he sailed. Uh, over 2-3 years, he went through all of this repeatedly. Does anybody know what this area signifies here? Anything related to Darwin's theory of evolution, if you know? If you say no, I'll quickly move to the next. If you know the answers, let me know. We have to talk about few things after this. I'm deliberately talking about this because I think we should initially talk about the theory itself and then talk about how it applies to things beyond biology. Okay. Okay. So, Dr. Pratima, this is Austroasia. So, it is basically the Malayan Peninsula. Why I'm showing you this is because Darwin theory of evolution has a contributor. There were two people who actually contributed this theory, not just Darwin. But indeed, Darwin started with this. 1831, he basically started his journey. By 38, he came across an essay which was written by Malthus on population, and that essay influenced him a lot. He sort of could identify and think about the observations he had in the journey and how it fits to the understanding how the diversity that we see and how it is connected with each other. In 1958, after 20 years, Alfred Russel Wallace, he was working in the Malayan Peninsula, sends an essay to Darwin, which effectively says the same point that Darwin always thought about. And immediately in July, they publish the work which we then got to know as Origin of Species together. Um, this is something that all of us don't really understand or think about, that Darwin's evolution is not proposed by only one person. There are a lot of contributions. Now, something that we need to think about, because we are talking about this theory beyond biology, is what Darwin himself was trying to do. Interestingly, Darwin has published 6 different books on plants. I thought I should tell you this, especially because the Department of Botany is involved here, and there are many botanists who are part of this initiative. So, 6 different books only on plants. He was, of course, very interested in plants. He studied orchids, climbing plants, insectivorous plants, different types of fertilizations, pollinations, their forms, and so on. Then again, he spent a lot of his time on studying barnacles, which again we don't know. We mainly know his work on finches, the birds, and he also studied earthworms. He published a book before he worked on it and published a book just before he died. This is very interesting because the theory he was thinking about was not only about explaining one phenomenon, but was something related that connects everything together. I'm not going to say he proposed the beginning of a universal theory, not really, but his theory actually worked in variety of things. The highlight is he was not a man who had only one idea. He did many things. This example is very famous, the orchid, which is named after him. In 1862, he sees this orchid. He predicts that the the nectar tube, which is so long, like few centimeters, 30 centimeters is recorded, must have a moth because that blooms at night. Must have a moth with proboscis long enough to reach the nectar which is at the bottom of the tube. He did that as a prediction. He had never seen that moth. Many years later, the moth was discovered in Madagascar, and by 1990s, it was also filmed. So the theory that he worked on also helped him predict few things. I'm just giving you an example. There are many examples. He never saw the moth, but he predicted that, and after 21 years, it came true. Why this is important? Because any theory is also measured based on how effectively it predicts what can happen, right? At the same time, he got a letter from Reverend Powell, who was interested in work. He studied his work. But he complained that Darwin, you have published this book, you have published this theory, but you have not acknowledged people who have contributed to becoming this theory. he acknowledged that. So the first edition do not have any acknowledgements or any history, but later he put forward acknowledgement, acknowledging many people. Right now, I'm just sharing with you few people that he acknowledged. So 12 people. There is a book by Rebecca Stott on the people who basically shaped the idea directly, indirectly that Darwin put forward. It starts from Aristotle, like 300, 350 BC, comes to Wallace, which is a contemporary of Darwin. These people worked on independent ideas, contributing to the whole theory. For example, this Al-Jahir, who was in Basra, right? So Middle Eastern area, which he studied a variety of animals. So this is from his book. The picture is from his book. He observed animals, their characteristics, how they survive, how they compete, and so on, put this together. So we can call him as an initial naturalist. Erasmus Darwin, who was Darwin's grandfather, a very well-known person, uh, talked about transmutation, right? How animals transform over time and they are not made like molds that one mold fits one. Robert Grant, Chambers, right? All of them contributed to a variety of things. Robert Grant actually taught Darwin in initial years. The point I'm making here is variety of people, including Lamarck, who proposed alternative theory of evolution, not by natural selection, uh, but the mechanism was different. This is very important to understand that the theory that we see is the tip of the iceberg. There are a variety of things that contributed to a theory, and that's where it is useful to study the theory, not as biological theory, so that it can be applied to a variety of things. So let's now come to what Darwin basically said, what he claimed, right? The first claim was living things share ancestors. So there is a history, there is an ancestry. What actually happens over time is seen as history. And the second part was the mechanism of selecting, which is natural selection, is one way it happens. So how the changes which are there throughout history come to be, right? So Darwinism is often synonymous to natural selection, right? This is unfortunate, right? I mean, the irony is clear that Wallace believed that Darwinism is strict selectionist sense more than Darwin did. Darwin did not talk about it's only this mechanism. He said this is a possible mechanism. And there are other mechanisms. Now we know there are renowned talks that the mechanism that Lamarck proposed just before Darwin, acquire characters, can also be now seen at some molecular and cellular level as actually selection mechanism. So the thing is, let's think about these two things as we go ahead. Share ancestry and then selection by natural means. The whole engine that was developed on this theory basically talks about these three things. This is very important for you to note it because we are going to use these three things to identify whether any other theory beyond the one that Darwin described fits the same theory or not. First is variation, that things differ from one another. Second is inheritance. The difference is similarity, whatever it is passed on or it is copied through generations. And then there is selection. Some differences spread, others do not, right? So nothing in this can be termed as only living, related to living, right? Please make this note. As we go ahead, let's quickly see what I mean by this. So variation is different things. So basically new variation happen by chance. What we know now, which Darwin had no idea about, is mutations happen. There is a genetic code. There are a process called as transcription translation, and then something changes in DNA can be carried forward, which we normally call as mutation. The figure here is basically Arabidopsis of a same plant, but what you see here is variation, sort of random mutations happening, making it variegated. Second is inheritance. Now I'm starting with other example which are seen other than biology. The differences get copied. For example, in text, right? Oral history is very difficult to prove, but text history is in a way relatively easy. So the transmissions of mistake, right? For example, we start with A, B, C, D, the copies, the generations happen, and somewhere there is a change. This change will carry forward because the inheritance continues, the copying mechanism continues, even with changes. There is a study, there is a field called as philology, which talks about this, especially in text, ancestry in text. And third is selection. Just give you an example. So perhaps this species or this individual, this character is better suited than this character, what you see. And our generation, selection happens that there is more spread. The dark green one, you can think about any individual, any species, something that you study, you have known. Some differences which are highlighted in this spread more than differences which are highlighted in this, right? As simple as that. Again, I'm not talking about specific example. I'm telling you what is underlying these examples. So perhaps this is more appealing to botanists in general. So this is perhaps the arrangement of sunflower. The flowers and outside are the petals. With no gap, a perfect packing is seen, right, as a sunflower. But is this something that was decided before the sunflower came into being, or this is seen after it is, right? And that is very important. Organism give every impression of having been put together using a criteria. There is a designer, there is an engineer or architect, right? Now, this is something was completely destroyed, is been again rethought and represented, the same theory of evolution. The differences that you see in time. So consider an example of a chair, right? A chair, the purpose of a chair is decided first before the chair comes into existence, the chair that I am sitting on, that you are sitting on. Someone has intended that chair to be a particular thing with particular characteristics, and this is true, but not sunflower. The purpose is visible only after we study, we observe, when it comes to being. Nobody intended that. Now, this is also very important because this is a key character that we can verify other proposed theories that sort of follow the theory that Darwin proposed, other than in biology. So what happens is our test is this. Let's see different example, different cases, and apply this test, whether it applies to all of these or not. Like I said, the example that I'm going to talk about are sort of simplified examples, right? Even though they come from peer review published journals and papers, because it's a popular talk and audience is mixed who may not have all the background of these things. I'm simplifying all of these things. Those of you are interested, I'll be very happy to share the whole bibliography with you that I have used to put together this presentation. So let's come to basic things that all of us have to check. What varies, what is copied, and what decides what survives. So that can be for anything. If any one of the three are missing, then we'll not say this doesn't fit Darwin's theory. We should be very careful if we say whether the evolutionary theory, evolutionary thought continues in the other theory or not. Okay? Now, before we go ahead, I just want to talk about something that is commonly described in biology, which is called as drift, right? So the graph talks about variations in different populations. A small community, let's say of 20 individuals, variation can happen. They can be fixed or they can be died, right? The other variation, sorry for this, the sites are moving on their own. The other thing is if we look at large population, right? The variants, the variety of characters that we see, they may stay. Those who make them fit will survive more, but other characters can just remain there, right? So let's say at a molecular scale, right? Most change is not driven by selection, right? There are many changes that happen in every generation in DNA. DNA changes, right? But every change does not necessarily result into something. Now, that is something was one of the points that you used in Mentimeter, right? I had deliberately stated that all mutation are dangerous. They result into something bad. And majority of you could not answer either wrong or right. It was somewhere in the middle. Now, that is very important for us to understand. These become neutral. they are not considered under selection, but they remain there, they get copied and so on. So drifting is important, which later Darwin had no idea, of course, but later it came into the theory. Darwin's theory of evolution has been also evolving. There came neo-Darwinism, then there came recent theories which use a lot of molecular and epigenetic kind of examples. So let's start quickly thinking about other fields where his theory is useful with the same engine, the same three things that Darwin put forward, which goes beyond biological understanding, right? What we know is a drift happens in every population. A paper by Tangaraja and his colleagues who work in CCMB here in Hyderabad, in India. Basically, they studied anthropologically different populations. They could come to know that there are 4,000 plus population, anthropologically different populations, well isolated population in the country. That is mainly based on the language they speak, the culture that they carry forward, of which 500 plus were tribes and 70 plus were primitive tribes, right? That are actually Adivasis. They also studied populations from Andaman Nicobar region, which is even more isolated. And also in that 30 plus hunter-gatherers who still work as hunter-gatherers communities, right? Their argument was high heterogeneity in Indian population is governed by, so Indian population is diverse. There is so much variety, right? Which is seen because of this. The heterogeneity in the population is governed by high endogamy, right? That is population having their own social boundaries. They don't mix. They don't marry into other groups, right? They don't share their culture or traditions. And over long term, they become isolated. And because they become isolated, their characteristics, whatever good or bad, continue in that population, right? This is very important to see. Now, they are not talking about biology, they are talking about anthropology. Now, anthropology actually is taking help of Darwin's theory. He initially proposed into this. So, like I said, they studied thousands of different such individuals and clubbed them into population. I'm going to come to how clubbing happens, but that clubbing also happens on the same theory. The long endogamy keeps effective population sizes small and small populations drift. They continue to copy things which are already present. The population that copies one type of thing remains here. This population copies some other type of things. You can think about these examples around you, your own family, your own history, and maybe your neighbors, right? The second part that continues in the language understanding, right, is mapped by a linguist. So Michael Wiltz is a very popular linguist. He was also controversial because of his theory, which is said to be by some, which is dominated by his understanding of Western world more than Indian, is about the Aryan-Indo kind of transition. I'm not going to talk about that. I'm not interested in that. I'm talking about his work as linguist, right? So what he says, which is completely based on Darwin's theory, is following conditions are followed onto languages, right? First is small undirected steps happen, like changes in language happen, which are very small changes that happen over generation, and they don't have a specific direction in the sense it need not result into continuation of that word or not continuation of that word. But second, there is this transition from parent to child, exactly as what biology tells us, right? They are passed from one generation to the next, almost always by parent to offspring, or a senior member of society to a junior member of society, not the opposite. And third is there is differential spread. If the outcome is an advantage to the speaker, it spreads through the population. If the outcome of using particular word, particular language, particular dialect and terms gives advantage to the speaker, then that spreads, right? There are a variety of reasons. He says one reason is prestige because that gives prestige, right? In his work, he actually quotes Dobzhinsky, who is very well a good proponent of theory of evolution, where he said nothing in biology makes sense except in the light of evolution, the theory that Darwin proposed, right? And this applies to language as well. Let's see an example of language and how this is the three things. The variation, the inheritance, and the selection occurs. Oops, sorry. I went to the last slide, sorry. Right? Let's come to the example that we have here, right? So some languages are relative, which we already know, we must have heard of this, but there is a scientific research gone into this, right? Consider Sanskrit language. The numbers are called as Eka, Dwa, Traya, right? Chatur, and so on. In Hindi, we say is Ek, Do, Teen, Char, sounding very similar, structure is very similar. In Tamil is Oru, Irantu, Munru, and so on. I'm not a Tamil speaker, so pardon my accent. And Mundri, which is again sort of similar, but it goes to Austroasia, the region that I just told you, Austroasia, where it completely sounds very different. Miad, Barai, Apia, which is not like any other language that we know, right? So the green language, these two languages are origin from Indo-European exchanges. Red one is Dravidian and blue is Austroasiatic. Sanskrit and Hindi are obviously related because this happened very recently, and we know that. But Tamil and Mundri, which are very old languages, right? They are not related to these two or each other, right? Now, how do we know that? Because none of us were there. It's hardly written, right? The same understanding of theory of evolution that had ancestry we can trace back is used here. The three separate families spoken in one country is the commonality, right? If we look at other words that also come into this, right, which is here, for example, the word in Sanskrit for father heaven or sky man, like parallel to God, right, is Daius Pitar, right, or Pitra, right? In Greek, it is Zeus Pater. In Latin, it is Luputor. And in Germanic, it is Tu Fatar, right? Now, what happened was linguistic could actually know only, sorry for this, know only the current words that are used to describe the same person, right? God or Father Heaven, literal translation, right? Because we knew how theory of evolution is being accepted and how we can trace back based on current generation, the previous ones, these individual words were considered, for example, here as species, right? And the ancestor was reconstructed, right? Meaning the ancestor, that is Zeus fat tail, right, is reconstructed word. It's never written anywhere. But because we apply theory of evolution here, we can come down to the origin of this word, which is distributed everywhere. Now the question is whether we know whether the Indo-European ancestor ever spoke to each other or which was ever together. We don't know, but they share a common ancestry. But if we plot the Dravidian language, Proto-Dravidian language, we can reconstruct similar thing, which is different than this, into that language also. Basically, the biological theory is used in linguistics with specific examples, right? But we also came across few things which may look alike but are not connected. Real relationship, basically what we call as phylogenetic homologous relationship, is there in Pitra or Pitra and father, right? Which is Sanskrit and English. Slowly it evolved into being. But if we see two other words which sort of mean the same is Theos and Theo, which are from two different languages, two different countries, places, like Greek and Aztec, right? There is no common history whatsoever, no exchange, nothing like that, but they sound similar, right? Now, this is where, as Darwin theory of evolution got ahead, the understanding between homology and analogy came into this as well. So the same theory extended can be used here. What counts is a regular correspondent repeated across many words, creating this phylogeny. Now, this is not just there in language that look alike were classified together as if they are related, but they are actually not. I could find variety of examples in plants and animals. These are a few plant example which were initially considered together, right? For example, mangroves or Amphiferal, right? The family which has oak, birches, and willows. Based on the catkins and tiny reduced flowers, they were put together. But later we realized that is only because wind pollination does this, the size of the flower, right? Otherwise, they are not related. Such example came in many times. Uh, this could be explained only because we studied a lot of theory of evolution into molecular era, and then we realized, okay, wait, they look similar, but they are not similar. Let's redo this, right? Same thing is now used in languages, right? For example, the Indo-Aryan language has its own tree, Dravidian language has its own tree, and also has its own tree, right? Interestingly, the vertical lines are inheritance, but there are horizontal lines also, which are borrowing, right? Can anybody tell me what this borrowing relates to in biology? So this transfer of words, sentences, some grammar, right? Which doesn't happen in a lineage, not inherited, but happens horizontally between closely placed populations, right? Anybody, what do we call this in biology? Horizontal transfer. I'm used to having interactive conversations. It's very difficult for me to speak only and not have interactions. So quickly, if anybody, do you remember where have you studied this? Horizontal transfer of information in biology. Shivam says symbiosis. Not really. But what is the mechanism? Where do you see horizontal transfer? Where ancestry is not same. So it is not the same lineage, right? But from other organism, other lineage, something comes in. Namrata says convergent evolution. Convergent evolution is an example, something that we talked just before this, not this. Shubham, yeah, you are on the right track. What in bacteria? A part of conjugation, absolutely. Yeah, Tanzil is from microbiology, sure. Yeah. So plasmids are very well known examples. Exactly, transformation. That there is horizontal transfer, that the ancestry doesn't have that gene, but it comes from some other group. Outgrouping is a part of that. Absolutely. Wonderful. So in languages also, this has happened. In languages also, many linguists, including Wetzel, he is a professor at Harvard and so on, has worked extensively in Sanskrit. Sanskrit literature, Mahabharata also. Right? I'm going to quote Mahabharata also here. The term that they came up with in linguistic is called as spark bond, right? Uh, which basically means that the unrelated families growing together, side by side, working together, can also get these transfers, and which is again very interesting, very similar to what we study in biology, right? They also talk about something which is called as word as fossils, the homeland from its plants, right? So words that exist, so in a population, let's say, ancestor population, which lives near sea in temperate regions, right? Where uh, we see different type of trees, animals, insects, and so on. Okay? So the Eurasian steppe belt, for example, which is Ukraine, Russia, and all that belt, they could actually identify specific words which define in local language specific terms like plants like oak and birds, or animals like wolf and bear and beavers, etc. Right? The grammatical analysis adds that horse, for example, a word for horse, is relatively new acquisition around 4000 BC, right? In Kazakhstan, where initially horses were there, and the whole region basically is known to domesticate horses. And in that time, there was no chariot, right? There was no rath, आपण ज्याला म्हणतो तसं तिथे काही नव्हतं, which came later, right? The idea I'm talking about here is the vernacular words, right, can also be identified and then looked at in the text, in the spoken language as fossils. So these come from the ancestors because these plants, animals were there. That was the homeland, right, for these. And they had these words. For example, palm tree, bamboo, tiger, lion, these words in the similar regions, right, Indo-European vocabulary, you don't find them, right? They were there only where we could find them, the tropical plants and animals, right, which are absent in that western region. They don't have words there, right? So even now, we can identify such fossil words which are present in this language and reconstruct vocabulary of that time around, let's say, 3000 BC. What were the words and what were the animals and plants? This happens now very regularly in texts, right? So the best evidence of ancestry nowadays is used where we compare texts. For example, we know Mahabharata, Ramayana, or such, tales. Or in Western cases, there are many tales that are spoken to, written through generation, and there are versions of it. Now, how do we come to understand what is the common ancestor, right? So Visual knows that in manuscripts of texts such as Mahabharata or even Ramayana, they have studied that. Our scholars in Bhadarka Institute as well as scholars in Western worlds have studied this, right? And they see a familiar relationship, right? What they see here is every manuscript is copied. Huh? So, like there were a generation, these manuscripts were copied over generations by hand, right? Something that is looked as error or mutation in manuscript A, if copied in B, remains as it is, right? And that is where Darwinism comes in, right? Less important trait for survival, right? That trait is not important for survival, it is, right? The more useful it is to identify relatedness, right? The neutral mutations in molecular phylogeny, neutral markers, these SSR markers, 16S is also very important. These markers, which are hidden, they don't come directly under natural selection, remain there and they get copied. And that's how we can go back to what it is, right? For example, in Bhandarkar Institute, they have been studying these scripts, right? Different editions of Mahabharata very critically throughout decades now, right? Uh, so specifically, Professor Suktankar is very well known in working on that. So what they did was they looked at all the manuscript, like we study species and their characteristics. They saw errors and they also identified uniqueness that was added in that versions, right? And they basically plotted a family tree of scripts of Mahabharata, right? Nowadays, so this happened by hand, huh? Because it started in 1919 and by 1966 it was completed. Now, they use software that phylogenetic scientists use to publish in manuscript. The word which is now called for this kind of study, which sort of replicates what we do in biology in linguistics, is called as phylomimetics. Phylomimetics, right? And that is something you should look for. There are papers on this. So this continues, right? This is very important if you are interested in folklores, right? For example, the Little Red Riding Hood. It's a very famous kind of a kid story, पण आपल्या इथे जसं इसाप नीती आहे, right? किंवा पंचतंत्र आहे, की stories आहेत, but that gives some message, right? There are 58 different versions of this, right? It has literally 72 features, right? So this Tyrini and his colleagues sort of recently published this. So this is from their research paper, right? What the research paper talks about, they studied all of these versions coming from different regions in the world, right? Including here, right? In India. And they identified that they did the same study that I'm talking about. And basically they plotted a tree based on the similarities and differences that they could found. And they can clearly see there are three different clearly regions, right? There is the African region, there is East Asian region. So this is very different, this is very different, and this is very different, right? The 8033. Where these tales, because there was hardly any written version of it that happened orally. These trails, exactly the characteristics of these trails. So this story, तुम्हाला जर माहिती नसेल तर क्विकली सांगतो. ते आपलं चल रे भोपळा टुणूक टुणूक ची एक जी गोष्ट आहे, किंवा ती तीन पिल्लं असतात आणि मग कोल्हा येतो आणि मग तो त्यांना खातो. हे जे सगळ्या स्टोरीज आहेत त्याचा रूट कुठे आहे असं त्यांनी बघितलं. तर त्यांना असं दिसलं की त्या 3 रिजनमध्ये त्या क्लिअरली गोष्टी रेप्लिकेट होतात. काय काय रेप्लिकेट होतं? द प्लॉट, स्टोरी काय आणि कॅरेक्टर्स कोण आहे, द विक्टिम, राईट? आणि तो कोल्हा कसा फसवतो त्या मुलीला आणि मग स्वतःच आजीच्या घरी जातो, आजीला खाऊन टाकतो आणि स्वतः आजी म्हणून बसतो आणि मग तिला वाटतं आजीचे वगैरे वगैरे, राईट? हे सगळं त्या फायलोजेनेटिक मेथड त्यांनी वापरल्या ज्या बायोलॉजी स्पीसीजसाठी वापरतात, राईट? हे का महत्वाचं आहे? कारण द थिअरी दॅट स्टार्टेड विथ डार्विन अँड वॅलेस, राईट, इज अप्लाइड इन सो मेनी अदर फील्ड्स. That is something that tells the beauty of this theory, that tells you that we need to study more, right? हे तुम्हाला जे पुस्तक दिसतंय, कव्हरचा फोटो टाकलाय मी इथे. M.R. यादरी म्हणून आहेत, भांडारकर इन्स्टिट्यूटचं पब्लिकेशन आहे. ते त्यांनी रामायणाचे जे काही व्हर्जन्स आहेत, अगदी वाल्मिकी रामायणापासून आत्तापर्यंत भारतभरात सगळीकडे आहेत. इव्हन साऊथ ईस्ट एशियामध्ये पण त्याचे व्हर्जन्स आहेत, राईट? तर त्याचा स्टडी केला, स्टॅटिस्टिकल स्टडी केला, राईट? याच्यामध्ये त्यांनी बघितलं, सो वेअर दे सॉ की what are these things that carry forward, what are the commonalities, where things got added, where they got removed. क्लॅडिस्टिक केलं त्याचं, राईट? फायलोजेनेटिक ट्री काढलं आणि हे पुस्तक इथे अवेलेबल आहे. दोज ऑफ यू आर इंटरेस्टेड, प्लीज डू. In a way, we have to say these folklore evolved in the same manner species evolved, right? Some of these things were really useful, helpful for society to make sure that children don't go out in forest alone, right? They don't trust other animals or strangers. These things are important and they got into the story and they continue. Other things, whether she was wearing a red thing or a white thing, or doesn't matter, right? So that is very important. There were other examples also other than linguistic. I mean, I'm giving you other examples, right? So Jeffrey Shower's The Canterbury Tales is a very famous tale in UK. मैं जिथे it's a pilgrimage that 20-30 people took to go to a particular place, sainthood, and while they go there, they share stories. So somebody said that there is a reward. You tell us stories, and whoever stories is best, will give them a reward, free food, right? So again, it's true or not doesn't matter. Basically, it's a very famous literature that has been followed for many years. Like I have been saying, so on the right hand side, these are the papers who actually published this. Phylogenetic software, and they are from reputed journals like Nature and so on. Phylogenetic software run on 58 surviving 15th century manuscript, right? With all the prologue, all the additions, produce a family tree like we do in biology. Take Turkmen carpets. Carpet जे असतात, the carpet has different designs, and these designs are also selected. They are also copied, right? There are variations. Or an artist changes something like a mutation. If it is more makes the whole carpet beautiful, attractive, it stays, right? Now, in case of languages, I have been talking about Indo-European languages. Gary and Atkinson has studied 87 different languages, right? Different words, thousands of words, right? And then use the same software, the method that we use to find molecular clocks, right? Ayurveda, for example. So Masa, he's a German scientist, but has been studying Charak Samhita, right? There are 52 different versions of Charak Samhita he studied, with computer and schematics, basically trying to find out um, which one is said to be the ancestor, the original one, which is closest to the original one, right? As medical text, this is a classic medical text, right? There are so many other examples. I'm going to skip some of this. Let's come to temples, right? This is something that I also wanted to happen. All of us are interested in temples, right? In temples also, right? So there is a researcher, Madhavan, who has, and his team has been studying on architecture of temples and how they evolved, right? There's a cultural evolution involved now. So what they propose is old temples, right? The concept of temple, for example, 3rd century onward. So Badami is one example, this 6th century or something, I think, BC, right? So the Badami temple, which is in Karnataka, is actually a cave cut into rocks, right? If some of you have visited Badami, right? That's the beginning. So slowly as cultures evolved, civilizations evolved, importance of temples evolved, the skills, artistry evolved of cutting rocks, transporting to somewhere, and then building something, right? Slowly, freestanding shrines started coming up, right? again, which is around now 1300, 1400 sort of area. So, for example, Konark, the Sun Temple of Konark, right, which is a rock which is transported and then built, right? You can see clearly temples change, right? But as this evolution came into, temple became more complex, right? Meaning temples were there, but at the same time, things got added to the temples, right? So dynasties, Raje, right, started adding things to the existing temples, right? For example, now this is a shrine in Kanchipuram, which is now standing Varadaraja temple. In this, what we see is the transition in the same area, not just this temple, but many temples. In Tamil Nadu, so Pallava era started with the temple, small temple. Chola added to that, Pandya added to even that, and Vijayanagara, which is the latest one, added even more. So, what are these additions? For example, sub shrines. So, the deities build sub shrines, the royals build sub shrines, Gopuras, right? So, this is something that you look at is Gopura. We have seen Gopura, which is larger, bigger, taller than the core shrine, the main shrine. गाभ्याचं जे मंदिर असतं त्यापेक्षा गोपूर खूप मोठं दिसतं. गाभ्याचा कळस छोटा असतो. Because these got added later, complexity added got later, right? मंटप असतील किंवा प्रकार म्हणजे आजूबाजूचा एरिया डेव्हलप झाला. This slowly evolved into landlordship by the temples, right? The latest one is, so temples had lots of zameen, lots of fields which they can give, which they can use, right? So this complexity has been growing. If we look at theory of evolution and how this happens, it is exactly the same, right? The growth happens because there are pressures, there are selective pressures. It happens because there are changes, and it happens because there is inheritance, right? All of these we find inheritance, right? So, for example, the Brihadiswara temple in Tanjavur, right? What we see there, the Chola dynasty, right? They have these different things sort of carved, right? 400 dancer, 12 dance master, 12 singer, 25 musicians, right? So, how do we know this? That these were actually hired by temples themselves. They were part of the temple, right? Along with the priest, of course, right? Now, because of them, the tradition, inheritance continue, right? This is heredity that we are talking about in temple construction, right? If you look at geology, sorry. If you look at geology, geology also talks about this, right? And because of theory of evolution, we understood this, right? So what we know is there is a researcher called as Ashok Sahni who has worked on this. The drawing is from his paper only. So around like 90 million years ago, so the Gondwana land was there, which was all southern continent mainly. They started breaking. So the India and Madagascar together broke from Africa, and from other end, South America broke, and then they continued. The continent started drifting because of the geological movements, right? This drifting continued. So around 65 million years ago, this whole continent, the Indian subcontinent was drifting. So along with that, life was drifting, right? Around 50 million years ago, it collided with Asia and where we are today, right? Interestingly, we are not seeing geography evolve, but because of this, what we see is stages of evolution happening in terms of organism, right? So Nasica batrachus seyadrensis, which is the purple frog that we found here sort of recently, we found that it is sort of related to one family of frogs, which is found in Seychelles, right? How is it possible? Sort of 3,000 kilometers ocean in between. How is it at all possible? Because the same theory can apply. How species evolve as over time. So in geology also now, scientists have started talking about use of biological theory, in the theory of evolution in geology. So geology itself is not evolving, right? These are planetary scale kind of activities, right? But isolation, dispersal, extinction, origin of new lineages happened on this, which we talk about, right? This has changed the idea of understanding history, geology, history, geography, and so on. How? Before, we thought of it as mainly the political narrative, right? Kings, battles, dynasties, etc. There was no perception of process of human development. There is a root, then there is branching, and then there is a tree, right? Aryan debate is a very good example. Now, because of Darwin's theory of evolution and looking at Darwin's theory and its, of course, growth into other fields, we now shifted the focus here in studying history also, right? So Marxism, Marxist, right? The history that Marx, I mean, the communist and Marxist history talk about, whether it's, I mean, the prediction is true or not, something else, but the way in which it was studied, it was sort of objective. Societal change, structure, economy, ordinary people, right? All of these were considered as something that is transformed from biology, right? It's not about collection of stamp. It's not about beautification, right? Characters of species. It is about or individual. It is about what is underneath that, right? Not just that. Many a times people think about technology is also extension of this, but which is not really, right? I told you, right? These three parts we have to check every time: variation, inheritance, and selection, right? So technology, for example, mobile phone used to be like this, then they became even smaller and so on. And now we see like completely screen, right? So yes, there is copying. There is copying of characters over generations of mobile. Selection is also there. We are selecting. It is very ruthless. आपल्याला जे हवं आहे तसा मोबाईल पाहिजे, राईट? बट व्हेरिएशन इज नॉट ब्लाइंड. आपल्याला जसं हवं आहे तसं ते बनवलं जातं, राईट? बनवलं जातं आणि आपण घेतोय असं होत नाही. This is very important. One more example, and I will sort of come to the main end point, right? There is this paper which is also very interesting, which talks about the floats or the boat structure over years, right? So Roger and Ellinch basically studied different canoe designs from different islands, 11 Pacific islands, and their cultures, right? And they studied everything about it. They identify there are 96 functional features like hull construction, the paddles, the sitting arrangement, how the woods overlap, how they are connected, and so on. How the outrigger it attached, the things are decided whether you survive the voyage or not, right? So it's very functional feature. Like that goes into selection. But there are 38 symbolic features like carvings, painting, cells, inlays, beautification, right? That has nothing to do with survival in storm, right? So the functional state of these man-made things also can be assessed through this evolution, the theory of evolution. The functional traits change measurably very slowly, right? Selection was holding them still. So these characters don't change much. They remain there, but others can keep on changing, right? For example, temples. We see temples which are based on very strong pillars, right? Now those pillars are very important, right? But the design on pillars can change. That design doesn't support the temple, pillars do, right? So this is something what we studied in theory of evolution and neo-Darwinism and then the recent evolution. It comes to this, right? This is a very good example. And after this, I'll stop. That we should learn from this, right? So the BT cotton example, all of you know what BT cotton is, right? So the Bacillus thuringiensis, the toxin that was the gene was put into cotton so that the pink worms or the bollworms basically get killed and so on. So there was lots of technology went into this and it worked for a few years for sure. BT cotton worked, let's say, for 8-10 years, right? Slowly, farmers in Gujarat, Madhya Pradesh, etc., started finding resistant worms, so they were not killed by that, right? Then they isolated them. They saw the genes. They realized that the genes, the gene that the product of that gene which is susceptible to the particular toxin has changed. So there is some mutation, right? And then by 16 and 17, control failure happened. So majority of the worms were resistant, right? How did this happen, right? So variation was already there. What happened was, so as you know, the population had mainly sensitive bollworms, right? But there were a few who were resistant, right? again, mutations happen, which is by chance, right? These mutations could make it as not susceptible to a particular toxin. What happened by that was slowly the population is susceptible went off, and those who were resistant by themselves, nothing to do with the process, right, became as they are. And then their population grew, right? And obviously, only those survive, they reproduce, and all the BT cotton were, of course, in problem because of the resistance. The same thing happens with antibiotic. Right? Now, what is the answer to that? If we really understand theory of evolution, we use it in agriculture and in number of other places, we can come to a solution. Something that China or United States did, right? What they started doing? Sorry, sorry, yes. Go ahead.
I think it was one mistake, sir. No problem. Can continue.
Okay, got it. So, what happened in China and United States? They started planting refuge non-BT cotton, meaning around the field of BT cotton, they started putting in non-BT cotton, meaning the worms, I mean, they will eat the cotton, right? But they will support resistant as well as sensitive populations. What happened by that is,
Hello.
hello,
Hello, audience, please, it's a request.
okay, got it, got it.
Please put, yeah.
Yeah. So the refuge population was near the fields. What happened was, because there were sensitive individuals also, the resistant population got diluted, right? They will of course intermix, they will breed. The dilution of resistant allele started. So the concentrated allele which was resistant in only few populations started going into other populations, so diluting it, right? And that worked very well in China and United States because they applied the understanding of theory of evolution into GM crops, right? I'm not supporting GM crops. I'm not saying anything about that. I'm saying that the theory, if you understand it correctly, can help us. But that doesn't actually apply everywhere, right? For example, mountains or snowflakes, and they vary a lot. But there is no inheritance, there is no lineage, there is no evolution, right? So this is something you have to be careful because there are talks, there are these examples which are shared without knowing. This is not evolution. This is analogy, right? So in biology, what we do many a times, right, is uh, we see a tree that survives, right, root off, right, cannot pass is learned, right. So if it is inherited, then it will stay there, right, and if it is inherited, it will continue. In culture, for example, a teacher can learn something this afternoon and pass it in tomorrow morning. This is acquired things, right, but they are also inherited. The summing up is basically biological evolution is Darwinian, cultural evolution is sort of Lamarckian, because then it's artificial, basically something that I acquire. I can write, I can record, I can tell to 10 people, and then it passes, right? But something that a tree has learned that this is the direction of sunlight, or this is the drought, and this is how, because of water combination, I could survive, right? It is not learned, it doesn't pass that learning anywhere, it's only inheritance, right? This is important because we have to be careful, right? So some DNA sequences spread even though they harm the organisms carrying them. We know that, right? They are by definition evolutionarily successful. A very good example of this is sickle cell anemia, right? So sickle cell anemia otherwise is a condition that makes you anemic. There is a health issue, right? But sickle cell anemia is a great advantage where there is malaria infestation, because malaria, which carries the parasite, requires whole RBCs, right? The sickle RBCs are not good enough. So the parasite, even though goes into the body, can't survive. So a sickle person has a better chance of survival versus non-sickle person in malaria infested regions, right? Same is true for habits and fashions also, right? That they spread by intimation, copying. They need not benefit the person. They may just be copied, right? The shirt I'm wearing may not benefit me at all, but anybody can copy this because they like it, right? So it spreads, tells you that the trait is success, right? But not it gives advantage, right, to the person who harbors it, the ghost, right? Now this is important because this is something that we see here in Pune a lot, right? So we see a lot of trees being planted here on Tekadi and other places, right? So what you see here, for example, there are the 6 same plants and one is different, right? Did this spread because it works or because it was copied? I mean, what we see many a times is because these plants we see planted everywhere, we just copy them and plant them everywhere, right? But that's not true. If Vedar Tekadi and the region is a ancestral grassland, then planting a mango tree there and planting any other tree there is not correct, right? So practices can persist because they work or because it is just copied, right? We have to re-examine, and Darwin's theory of evolution helps us re-examine, right? So we come to this slide again. This is where we started, right? All of this, except perhaps the mobile phone, show all the 3 characteristics, right? The biological, the temples, the language. We saw designs in carpets. We saw geology, we saw geography, understanding of history, where variation followed by inheritance followed by selection is equally important. This is a slide which is very important. Take a look. These are sort of things that come from biology but useful outside biology. For example, what is copied? General idea is what is copied are genes and traits. So outside biology, words, motif, design, practices, skulls, what we generally now call as memes, right? That's a word coined after genes by Richard Dawkins, right? Consider passing it on, inheritance. What is inheritance outside biology? It's teaching, imitation, apprenticeship, copying things in n number of other fields, right? So chance alone, like genetic drift, not because selection, chance alone. So random copying examples, copying of text, copying of pictures, copying of colors, right? A variant spread for no reason because it is not advantageous or damaging, right? So share by ancestry, convergence, something somebody talked about convergent evolution, right? So convergent evolution is they are not actually directly inherited or related, but they share common characteristics like wings. It's a very common example, right? Wings in butterflies, wings in birds, wings in insects, I mean butterflies, other insects, wings in bats, right? Mammals, aves, arthropods, insects, different, right? But they show similar share characteristics, which initially came by accident and then stayed, right? So, for example, chance resemblances, right? It proves nothing. Chance resemblance है, बाकी कुछ नहीं, right? Family tree, that is phylogeny, which is biological, right? The stemma of manuscript, something that I talked about, right? A language tree being constructed. All these examples follow basically one row in each table follow the same thing, right? The example that I'm sharing with you are tested with data. This is real data that I'm talking about. One question now you can take home is look at your department, your home, your locality, right? Some practice that has been passed on over 2 or more generation. Think about what varies, right? What is changing, what is copied, right? And what decide it survives, right? The work that I've basically quoted here are mainly from these publications, right? This book is very good. It is only in print, not soft copy available. Evolutionary Thinking Beyond Biology, which is edited by Nanjundaya, Indian Academy of Sciences book. There are research papers. There are other papers also. Those who are interested, I'll be happy to share with you. It's very interesting. These are the examples that we took here. And yes, thank you so much. Yeah.
Yes, thank you so much, sir.
So
I request if there are any questions,
yeah,
you can
I'll be happy to. I
unmute
mean,
yourself.
yeah.
Yeah, you can unmute yourself and you can speak
And you can
directly
start your
or else
camera
you can.
also.
Yeah.
So, like I said at the beginning, and I'm again sorry because I sort of put many things together, but that was the idea that I could introduce these things to you. Some of this you already know, some of things perhaps new to you, and then you can actually start working on it.
Hello, hi sir, Vikas here.
Hello.
Sir, I'm absolutely from non-biology background, so if you
Okay.
can just throw some light on you mentioned about horizontal transfer, uh,
Okay.
the
In
boring.
biology.
So if you can share some examples of it, that would help me
Okay. In
understand
biology,
better.
you mean?
No, in other spectrum of lives as well.
Okay.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I first talk about biological example. Basically, so horizontal transfer is basically, as we know, heredity happens. So there is ancestor generation, parental generation, your generation. So in that line only, genes got inherited. Correct. Now, what we realize, especially in lower is not a correct word, but for the sake of better word, lower organism or bacteria and other species, we realize that this ancestry from parent to offspring is broken somewhere where the genes also come from other individuals, right? So plasmid is a very good example. There are very well documented processes here where genes from different lineage are passed on through some process, some mechanism to this lineage, right? In language that happens. So for example, the Indo-European language, the Dravidian language, and the Austro-Indian language, right? So initially they started as their own at different locations. But as culture grew, as travel started, right? Mainly the ocean travel started, exchange started, bartering system started. People grew something here and sold there and got something there and here. All these systems started. Slowly, as you can imagine, they had to have some communication between each other, right? Now that communication is very important, meaning I speak a particular language and they speak a particular language, but we have to have common words, right? Some words, because I knew the example that I showed you, the birch plant, the oak tree, right? Or wolves, bears, salmons, which are found regularly in the Western world, the European world, right? They are never found here in the Indian world. So we'll have no word for it, but they will have word for it. Similarly, the word for plants, mango, the word for, what should I say, different types of corns or rice, or spices, right? They originated here because we grew them. Now, what happens is lineage continues, and somewhere there is a system happening, and somewhere somebody gets some word, some term, some language from some other area into your population. So this is horizontal transfer in a way, meaning the lineage is broken, not broken, but it's got joined, conjugated by something else, and it fixes. So Marathi, for example, has a lot of words which are Farsi, right? So garaz, for example, because I don't know whether
Oh,
you know the word garaz.
oh, Marathi. Oh.
Garaz is a very common Arabic word,
Mm.
right? Or Peshwa. Peshwa is a very well-known word, right? It's not Marathi.
Oh. Even दरवाजा वगैरे हाँ
Yes, correct.
कळालं.
So this is horizontal transfer that happens in languages, that happens in design, right? So temple designs, for example. So we have temples in Maharashtra where we see some Mughal influence as well as our traditional influence.
Okay, sir. Thank you. कळालं.
Yes. If there are any more questions,
Any thoughts? Yeah.
so I just wanted to ask you, like you spoke about languages and temples in the cultural evolution.
Yes.
Uh, what about the speed at which this evolution is taking place,
Yeah.
especially
That's true.
with social media around? The speed at which the ideas are copied, then they're modified, or even spread. So definitely, it is going to make a huge difference, unlike
That's absolutely.
maybe biological evolution. So your
Mhm.
thoughts on this?
That's absolutely true, sir. So, the- what I'm generalizing this. Right? Basically, the time scale that used to happen is getting compressed because, like you said, there is huge communication now. And I'm sitting
Hmm.
here, my nephew is going to go to France in next week. I can just call him on WhatsApp, which was never
Hmm.
there just 10 years ago, right?
Correct.
So, because of this, the more chances of interaction happen, right? There is exchange, right? The
Hmm.
rate of exchange will, of course, increase if more interaction happen, right? So, for example, to study evolution, scientists use bacterial models, right? Because like you said, their generation time is so small. Something that will take in mouse or in rats or in chimpanzees few decades happens in few months, right?
Correct.
So because the rate of change, generation is really huge, especially with social media and this communication, right? These exchanges are speeding up, right? So for example, something the generation alpha or uh, the generation that people are talking about right now, they have so many other words that we have never heard of.
Yeah, exactly.
And they originated in US or Europe, but our kids here use them because of social
Correct.
media, because they follow this. At the same time, it also depends on the cost of adapting that and using it, right?
Mhm.
If, for example, building a temple or a new architectural building, right? The cost is really huge. Even though we see it everywhere, we'll not copy it everywhere. In past few couple of decades, we have seen buildings which are not stone but glass, right?
Mhm.
Now we copied that, but we did not think about why glass buildings are important in
Yeah,
temperate colder regions
exactly.
and not really in
Correct.
tropical regions, right?
Correct.
Now that is slow. So their increase is slow, but also
Mhm.
we understanding they are not correct is also slow.
Yes, got it.
So this rate
Uh,
is of course dependent on how fast the exchange is.
uh, you can check chat box if there are any questions. Okay. Now, may I request Dr. Anuradha madam?
Yes, yes. There are few comments in the chat box
Yes.
that everybody's
Yeah,
appreciated
yeah.
the broad canvas, actually, the
Yeah.
very extensions of the because looking at this evolutionary thinking beyond biology, then whatever they got with your lecture, it's beyond that rather. So actually, I'm here to just express the thanks and very informal, but it's really very interesting that you have started your lecture with very simple language. You know, you have taken, so it was appreciated by everybody. The application was the like just you say that the glass buildings. The similarly that application actually hurted us. Great.
Yes.
So the understanding ancestral tree on the on the broader canvas, the cultural canvas especially, and the examples whatever you have taken with the similarities of Isabnitis and Ramayanas and phylogenetic trees that carpets and Ayurveda, it's very interesting to know about that. Though we are most of us we are biologists or we are studying science, still it is really interesting to see such growth, development, extension, expansion, and whatever the question you put here for the question to take home take, it's really interesting. Thank you very much, sir, on behalf of Maharashtra Vriksha Samvardhini Pune, Department of Botany, RJ College, Mumbai, बाबासाहेब खर्डेकर महाविद्यालय वेंगुर्ला, Institute of Natural History Education Research Pune. From all these four institutes, organizations, we are very, very thankful. And I'm sure all the audience here really get benefited, rather they provoke to think beyond something, because everybody from us, we know the Darwin equal to selection. So that just from single word to the very bigger beyond canvas was really great. We are thankful to you, thankful to audience, whoever they've attended. I'm sure they get benefited. So I appeal all the here, whoever they join, please visit our YouTube channel, Mission Devrai, and follow us, subscribe us, so you will get such type of interesting lectures, thought-provoking lectures to you. So thank you very much, sir. Thanks a lot.